It's time for the 32081 Scoreboard Show. Let's recap the latest weekly scores and highlights from around the county.
And welcome to this edition, week 3 of the 32081 Scoreboard Show. I'm the Todd, and joining me, as always, my co-host, Anthony Richards. How you doing, Anthony?
I'm doing good, Todd. Thanks for having me on.
Everything going good over at the Ponte Vedra Recorder?
Oh yeah, everything's going great. You know, it's they keep you busy with a bunch of community stories, and then of course sports is kicking into high gear here in the fall.
So let's start off with Nease, because Ponte Vedra was off, but I know you were able to get some JV in over Ponte Vedra to cover, and you're going to talk about that. But let's talk about this Nease game first. They travel about 3 hours away to Davenport. You and I kind of talked last week that, Ponte Vedra had the trip over to Tallahassee, and now Nease was going to Davenport. So we were talking about how Ridge Community was going to be, because you said they were a Jekyll and Hyde kind of team. They won by 31 week, lost by 31 week, and now we're looking at the score, and they lost this week 48-6 to the Nease Panthers. This was really a game of one half, and from your standpoint, this has got to be a great win for Drafts coming off the Creekside loss and seeing the boys come together and come away with a huge victory.
Oh yeah, it's definitely anytime you can kind of be a road warrior and take that long road trip, and like going down south of Orlando, and then to come back with a W, just like the Tallahassee trip the week before for the Sharks, it just makes that trip on the bus so much shorter, so much more happy. You might be playing music, chatting about what you just did, what the big win you just got, and then to not just win but to blow them out is it's just got to be a pretty good feeling. I'm sure it doesn't fully erase the taste in their mouth from the tough Creekside loss, but I mean it definitely helps moving forward.
So let's start talking about the passing attack, because these are unofficial stats, by the way. This is just from me looking at the game. Nate Harry, it looks like, had a great game. He went 10 of 13 for 176 yards and 3 touchdowns in the first half. Okay, that's just the first half, and he had 6 different receivers that he hit. So he's really coming along. And then what we also talked about, I got a new nickname for Maddox Spencer now. I'm calling him Lethal Weapon, because that's exactly what he is, okay? 4 receptions is what I have for him in the half, again, unofficial, for 102 yards and 2 touchdowns. Now, I also heard that someone saw on some stats, and I haven't been able to confirm this, that he's number 6 right now in the state, possibly. Could move up after the game stats get put in there. Man, he is electrifying to watch, but also now Nate Harry spreading out the ball to 6 different receivers. You and I talked about that first week. When was this receiving core going to wake up? Because he's got a lot of talent out there.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's probably the biggest takeaway coming out of this game is that, the 6 different receivers, like, at this point, it's already 3 weeks in, but Maddox is going to get his, his receptions, his targets, his yards. It's the other guys that, if they just, sprinkle in some catches here and there and make some first downs, some big plays here and there, as well as Maddox, I mean, that just takes a huge step forward for the Nease offense, and it gives the defenses so much more to think about. So hearing that he, targeted 6 different guys, I mean, that's a big positive. It's something I'm sure Drafts is pretty happy to continue, moving forward.
Now we were talking also about the sophomores in this class, that he's got 4 or 5 that are playing on varsity. And when you look at this also, one of the receivers was Braden Felder, who so far in just the first half had 71 yards with 5 receptions, which you got to be happy with that. But then you also look on the other defensive side of the ball. Jacob Curry's name keeps coming up here, Anthony. I mean, he had 5 tackles in the first half. He caused a sack, fumble. Noah Hodge, another sophomore, 3 tackles. Jack Rorix, who is not a sophomore, but he had 4. And then I got to ask, Kirill Carter. Here he is again, interception, and returns it for 25 yards. So the combination of the sophomores and these juniors and seniors on defense and offense, it's starting to really look like a recipe for success, not just this year, but the building blocks of a couple years to come.
Yeah, it's the talent. They're really starting to show it. These are guys that showed potential, at the JV ranks, and obviously that's why they're playing at the varsity level as sophomores. And so, that now that potential, sometimes you kind of get the promotion to varsity, and maybe it doesn't, it does move a little faster, and it's things are, heads might start spinning with play calls and all that, and these guys just seem to be stepping right in. It's really good to see, and especially I know the coaching staff is really loving it, because you just never know, with a young defense, the potential's there, but you don't know, are they going to realize it later in the year, and they're realizing it just a couple of weeks in. I mean, imagine what they'll look like by the end of the year. And they just seem to be, like you said, with Curry and Korea, like, they're magnets to the ball. It just seems like they're just gravitating to the ball, and that leads to making plays, not just in the backfield, but in the secondary.
And it's kind of funny because if you think about it, they gravitate towards the ball, but if you are holding the ball, you definitely don't want Jacob Curry gravitating towards you. And if you're a receiver, you definitely don't want Krill Carter gravitating towards you. So I think that's it. Now, the other thing about this in watching the first half is I kind of felt like this was the first game for them where all three parts of the game came together for them, because the other part of this is special teams. And Elijah Luckett comes through again in the first half, gets a block punt, and recovers his own block for a touchdown. So even the special teams are coming through and contributing. And if they can keep this up and going into Fletcher next week, that game's going to be really, really interesting, because I think a lot of people might have kind of checked that one off as a loss at the beginning of the season with all the press Fletcher's gotten with, Marcellus Tate and everything. And I don't think he's playing this week. But if they keep putting stuff together on all three sides of the ball, I don't know. It's going to be a really good game next Friday.
Yeah, no, they're really starting to look like a complete team, and this is just that after the first couple of weeks, you hope to kind of figure things out, in high school, and I think they're really starting to figure it out. And yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if they can continue it, moving forward. And I know you mentioned Elijah Luckett. I mean, I don't know, some guys just have a knack for knowing just how to get around the edge on a field goal or an extra point or breaking through and, kind of using their speed to get and block a punt. I mean, it's just, some guys they have a knack. It's a special talent that they just have, and they might not even know how they do it. They just use a combination of speed and knowing exactly where to find that hole, and the instincts take over. And he just seems to be a guy that can make plays and is truly special when it comes to special teams.
Well, congratulations to Nease Panthers on their victory, 48-6, and they will be going over to Fletcher, so we will give you that information a little later in the show. So Ponte Vedra was off, and actually, Anthony, I got to say, after going to Tallahassee and having that big win over Florida State University High School, probably not a bad week to have a bye, to kind of settle down after a huge win, come back and get refocused. They're going to play Middleburg over here in the tank. I'm kind of going with Ponte Vedra on this one. I think I kind of mentioned it last week because I had the dates off. I thought they were playing this weekend, but I like Ponte Vedra in this game. I think they're really starting to come together. I think the offense, the defense, they're playing strong, and I just think they're going to come away with a victory this Friday.
Yeah, no, I think they're really I know we'll talk about, I saw some JV action on Thursday night, but I saw a couple of varsity guys there. I talked to Joe Mahoney for a little bit, and I even talked to Coach Price, and they all said, it's kind of early for a bye, but at the same time, coming off the Tallahassee trip, it's not a bad thing, especially if you win that game like they did. Now you're coming off a long trip. Now you can kind of relax and really get ready for the main part, the next part of the season, and kind of that next, kind of kick that you need to make in order to make a postseason run. And yeah, when it comes to Middleburg, I know they've only scored 7 points in both their first games. They lost 26-7 to Hawthorne, and then 32-7 to a really good Bradford team. So I don't know offensively. It sounds like they're still trying to figure things out, and that's not, if you're averaging 7 points a game, that's not a good thing going to face a Sharks defense that is looking to just attack and eat you up alive. I mean, I don't know if they'll maybe even getting to 7, maybe an accomplishment for them, possibly.
So you mentioned the JV, and it really looks like I'm interested in hearing how things went for you out there. But we talk about the sophomores that Drafts has over at Nease on the JV, and also the few that are playing on varsity and the pipeline that he's got. Ponte Vedra's got the same pipeline over there with their sophomores and their JV squad.
Yeah, it was interesting to get out since the varsity, the big boys were off. I figured, okay, I'll go out and kind of shoot some photos of some JV action and kind of just get that feel. It's a different type of feel, you're always learning at the high school level, so there's always coaching done, but at the varsity level, a lot of that's done in practice, and then you get into the game and it's just so focused in game. You have between drives where you can kind of talk, but it's interesting in the JV level. All the guys, obviously want to win. They're keeping score. They want to be the top guys at the end, but every play is a learning experience, and the coaches kind of know that. And every play is a chance to learn, both offense and defense. Every time you step off the field, the coaches are right there kind of trying to lift you up or kind of teach you hey, this technique. So it's just an interesting kind of vibe, a JV game compared to a varsity game. It's a little more relaxed, and it allows for a little more of a learning experience for everyone involved. So it's pretty neat to be part of.
And I think it's interesting, like you said, it's a little bit more of a relaxed, but also for you and I to cover football and dissect it, we're looking at it also through the eyes of what the future's the future's holding, and it's looking pretty good right now in the 32081 area, so to speak, with these two high schools. And speaking of that, now you and I talked during the week that there was a little shift in the district that Nease and Ponte Vedra are in, because there was that. I think the week one we talked about was a Gulf Coast or another high school that was listed at one point in our district, and all of a sudden this week when I went to check it, Tocoi was in there. So now we have Nease, Ponte Vedra, Flagler, Palm Coast, and Tocoi. Kind of Flagler, Palm Coast hanging out there, but I personally like it. I think it's a nice shift. I mean, you've got all the rivalries right here in the district very close together. What do you think about that?
I like it. I like it as well. It's you can never, cutting down travel is never a bad thing, and
right.
I know, over the years the state association has kind of gotten some, a little bit of like flack in terms of just how they design things, having to make teams travel so far when they really have teams that are similar sizes and could be in the same district in their backyard, or whatnot. And it kind of makes sense both from a rivalry standpoint, but also just logistically. We've got these newer schools popping up around St. Johns County. I think, the FHSAA is kind of figuring out what, how to treat that. And as they become, kind of like viable schools and grow in size and kind of match that of Nease and Ponte Vedra, I think that it just makes sense you've got almost this naturally fitting district. Why not just, make it easy and just say, okay, you guys are all lumped together.
And you mentioned something there because you were talking about the bus rides, and that comes with a cost that a lot of the booster clubs or the touchdown clubs like at Nease cover. So I'm also thinking from a operational standpoint to have these district games, these district matchups closer together. Now, like for example, let's say you had a Gulf Coast that we were talking about that was slated that looked like they were in there. You're not going to get a lot of Nease and Ponte Vedra fans traveling down to play a game over there. But if you have Tocoi, Ponte Vedra, Nease, and even Flagler, which isn't that far, okay, it's about 50 minutes, 45 minutes, at least you're going to have fans show up. And what happens there? You got tickets, you got concessions, everything else, which obviously goes back into the club to help support the football team. So I think that's also a very good benefit of it, as well as being able to know your competition. It's a little bit easier to have a competition that, like, say you're in a 15-mile radius or whatever it is, than having, like you and I talked about, an outlier out there that you don't know much about. You don't hear people talking about them as much.
Oh yeah, definitely. And when you talk to coaches about kind of when they're devising their schedules, obviously the district is already kind of slated in, but when they're finding non-district games, a lot of that goes into, factoring in who they're going to call, or if that team travels well, or if they're close enough, because you'd be surprised how much off of concessions and tickets that is actually made, and goes back into everything from jerseys to just making the program run and be a viable program.
Okay, so going into this weekend, you're doing double duty again. You're going to be like back to week one. You're going to be jumping from games because the schedule probably worked out for you. So we've got Nease at Fletcher. That kickoff is going to happen at 6. That's a little bit of an earlier game for everybody. So you Nease fans, if you're traveling to Fletcher, also don't forget about that nice Jacksonville Beach traffic that you're going to have there. So you might want to give your son to travel over there. How you liking this game in the end? What do you think here? Marcellus Tate, we don't know if he's playing. There's rumors out there that he might not. He's a D1 commit. The Fletcher team has really rebounded over there. Now we over at Nease are starting to look at that. Hey, we're getting all three sides of the ball. I say all three sides of the ball. That doesn't make any sense, does it? We'll just say all aspects of the game. So with that said, I think this is, like I said earlier, I think it's going to be a good game, and it's going to be not as easy as I think some people thought at the beginning of the year for Fletcher.
Yeah, no, I really do think it turned into a real toss-up game where I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised either team if they won, or I'd be surprised if it ended up being a blowout. I expect this game to be close all the way to the end, and probably come down to one of those last-minute drives or a team trying to make a drive in order to tie the game or get that lead, because Fletcher, they lost their first couple games to really good teams in Mandarin and then Tallahassee Childs, but they were both on the road. Mm-hmm. It's kind of hard to go 2 weeks without you haven't even been home yet. So they finally got their home opener last week, and they beat Jackson, which is also a common opponent that Nease and them share. and they beat them 7-0, which is kind of
it's kind of close.
A defensive kind of slugfest like Nease. So it's, I mean, really, it's hard to kind of, separate these two teams right now. 3 weeks in, obviously we'll know a lot more after this game, but
it's a toss-up,
really,
like you said.
Yeah, it's a real old barn burner type of a high school football game. It should be fun.
Now, moving on over to, we kind of finished up with this about Ponte Vedra and Middleburg when we finished talking about Ponte Vedra. But, the one thing that, as I was thinking when you were talking about it earlier, was the one thing that always kind of scares me about Middleburg is over the years they've been a really scrappy team. You just don't know when they're going to just eke out that win that people didn't expect them to get. And I got to tell you, I'm expecting, like I said, Ponte Vedra to win this game. But in the same sense, I'm hoping that they come off their bye week, they come off strong, and we don't see that scrappy win from Middleburg. And it's going to. And I think Ponte Vedra in this game could put up 30 points.
Oh yeah, definitely. I could see that, especially how the offense really started to find their way. In the game against FSU. Last weekend. So I mean, I could definitely see them building on that. And like you said, against Middleburg, I worked for the Clay today for a little while in college, and so I got to cover some Clay County teams in Middleburg, and they're exactly that. They're a gritty team that will always fight you, and always make life difficult, for you, and you got to work for those wins. You may end up winning by 30 points in the end, but you didn't open that up until the fourth quarter. They were hanging around the whole time and making it at least feel like, hey, a touchdown or a nice drive here, and we're back in this game. But I think it does help that the Sharks are at home, in the Shark Tank, and that helps. I think Middleburg getting those gritty wins is probably more likely, on their home field. So them having to travel over to Ponte Vedra is definitely an advantage, and I'm sure after that big win in Tallahassee, the Shark Tank will be packed as it normally is, but maybe even a little bit more loud.
All right, Anthony. Well, listen, hey, drive carefully up and down A1A as you're coming back and forth between Ponte Vedra and Fletcher, or Fletcher and Ponte Vedra, I should say. And we will definitely speak next week. And as always, thanks for joining us here on the 32081 Scoreboard Show.
Thanks for having me.
Well, that's week 2 in the books and week 3 on the horizon. Also, you have 2 great middle school games happening at Nease this Wednesday. Palm Valley and Pine Island square off in the Battle of the Parkway at 5, and Valley Ridge takes on Mill Creek in the nightcap at 7. Be sure to check out Anthony Richards on X at ANTNY Rich. That's ANTNY Rich. And you can also read his articles at PonteVedraRecorder.com. Please be sure to like and subscribe to the show, and thank you for listening to the 32081 Scoreboard Show.
Thank you for listening to the 32081. We hope you enjoyed today's episode.
I love the show, guys. You're awesome.
Please don't forget to subscribe to the show so you can join us for the next episode.
I never miss an episode. It's the best.
Until next time, take care.